All right, so we have a few people here that didn't go last time. Your name, who you interviewed, the three things you learned. Everybody on this side is gone, haven't they?
Yes.
Almost everybody in the middle is gone, haven't you? So we just have two on this side today. And the others, I don't know what they're gonna do for points, because we gotta move on after this. So we'll go ahead and we'll start with Ms. Adams. What did you learn? If they come in, maybe they'll get to do theirs. You didn't go? All right, so we'll do this.
Okay, so my name is Chloe Adams. I interviewed Tom Connell from the collective group by Inception Sourcing. I basically interviewed him because he knew my dad himself, so it was fit. The three things I learned that persistence is important, that you have to find what works for you and the prospect. You can't just like drive them absolutely crazy. You have to figure it out. But you can never research too much ahead of time, and it becomes more natural with more experience. You just kind of learn what works for you and what works for other people, and you learn how to read people better the more you're around people. In conclusion, I figured out I do not want to sell software, like ever. That's so boring. And but I am excited to go into sales because there's a lot of opportunity in it. And
So you think you don't want to do software, what would you like to do?
medical devices.
Medical devices. That's what a lot of our students want to do.
I go back and forth between pharmaceuticals and that all the time.
Ms. Howard.
My name is Zoe Howard, and I know we weren't supposed to interview a family member, but I did my dad because he was like one of the people that I could interview that sold something in Tampa.
Okay.
It was more to, he works for Kerr-McGee. He's worked for 21 years. And Kerr-McGee, Tronox bought over Kerr-McGee. And Tronox is a chemical plant that sells titanium ore products, and it's has other chemicals in there. But he started his career working in the lab, and then he moved to being a safety manager. So now what he does is he pretty much sells his employees on making sure that they take the right procedures in order to be safe and not get hurt. So
So he sells safety.
pretty much, yeah. So he sells the employees on a relationship basis on the guidelines they follow to be safe. He taught me that he travels a lot. They have plants in the Netherlands, Australia. He goes to Brussels quite a bit, so that's pretty cool. It's heavily based on relationships and trust that you have their best interest at heart. So that's pretty much all he's looking out for is their safety. And always maintain a good relationship with officials of the company because you might want to come back. He left for 4 years and worked for OG&E, and then they come back and they offered him a promotion when he came back because he left on a good relationship.
Okay, I think that's important. Don't burn bridges.
Yeah. So in conclusion, I would say I probably don't want to go into the safety field, but I think it's cool that he sells things that are intangible and kind of get an insight on that. So that might be something that I look into in the future.
You can sell software.
Yeah.
That's
Probably not.
intangible.
Probably not, but
Okay, all right, very good.
My name is Taylor Johnson, and I interviewed my aunt, Kim. She works for Cintas, and she also sells safety. So she sells their programs, and then she conducts them, I guess. So she teaches them the ways of the safety process and stuff like that. But they're also professional clothing company too. So they sell to different places for work and stuff like that, work outfits, I guess. But 3 things I learned. She said that Cintas has they have very strong morals and ethics, which is cool because she's like turned her life around from when she was younger. And she said that so like with the sales, she said she focuses more on like relationship, and so they come back to her rather than going on to the like the cheaper route of safety courses, I guess, or what she sells. But in conclusion, I know that I do not want to be in that. So that's all.
Okay, all right, very good. Anybody else?
Sorry, my voice is still, struggling. My name is Joseph. I did my interview of a friend of mine, Ariel. She's a sales rep for State Farm, and we were friends since OSU. We went to OSU together, so that's how I know her. But she works in the sales department for State Farm, so she sells insurances, certain packages like CDs or annuities, mortgages and stuff like that. And so the three things I've learned is like she does cold calls as well. She's a manager, like a supervisor, so she just kind of helps train people on the sales floor who does cold calls and just kind of inform customers as to what's the best packages for certain things that they're interested in. And she tells me that how she teaches them is that she just gives them a script of their own. Most salesmen, they have some sort of like outline script that they use, but she recommends that they all kind of personalize it the way that fits them. So it just kind of helps kind of make things not routinely, but just kind of familiar. So yeah, and just being persistent with yourselves, and it's kind of have a relationship-based transaction. Don't treat everything like it's just just a sales transaction alone. And my conclusion is I'm not really that interested in sales. I'm not really a social person, so
Okay.
I can also do that. But I mean, I like what it entails. I mean, you can apply it to a lot of things. So that's all.
All right, very good.
My name is Bernard Basso, and I interviewed a friend from church, Mr. Don Akada, and he used to work at Schlumberger is an oil and gas company. They sell solution and usually oil equipment. So when I interviewed him, first of all, he started with that company as an operation he was doing, and after that he got promoted to BSS representative. And what I learned is, he told me to sell oil and gas equipment, it needs a lot of patience because it's very expensive. You need patience first, and you have to be knowledgeable. His basic formation is uh, chemical engineer, so he was able to explain some product and some facts to the customer. He told me he missed one big sale because the customer was more knowledgeable than him. So that's the second one. The third thing I learned is they travel a lot. He's been for that company for 15 years. He's been in Africa, in 4 different countries in Africa, and he's been in South of Arabia. Basically, more around 80 in 8 different countries. So I learned that for that position, I'm not gonna be stable with my family and stuff. I'm not gonna be here based in US, and I need to have a background in chemical. I can still learn, but I think I don't want I don't want to be in that field. Maybe I will go back in my accounting stuff and sell accounting software stuff like that.
So you learned you didn't want to sell this.
No, I don't want to sell it because I love math, but I don't want to do those pure math. So or you go back and sell maybe accounting software.
Okay.
Yeah, because accounting is my major and I sell my.
So did you meet him in your home country, or did you meet him here?
No, I met him here.
You met him here.
I met him here at church.
Okay. Very good. All right.
Thank you.
Good job. Come on in. Yeah, you can press. Yeah, it was for you.
Hi guys, my name is Christopher Ojeda. I interviewed the sales and product management lead who used to be the salesperson for a company called Carlisle Food Service Products. It's the company I'm actually currently working for. And so he's, the head of sales and price management. So his name is Austin Grasso. He was pretty excited to do this interview with me, so I actually pretty much enjoyed it. 3 things I learned about it. First thing was that the sales for a sales team isn't always all that it's about. Like, that's the biggest thing he hit on when he talked about, working for the sales team. He said that the relationship you build with the company, especially when you work for a super large company, is sometimes more important than the sale itself. He said that, like, in the long term, some of the distributors he worked with actually ended up working out better in the end of, like, his tenure when he was a salesperson than the first time he went for them, because he'd seen them a couple more times, they talked to them a couple more times. You feel much more comfortable when you've met someone, X amount of times, more than just, first time cold turkey. The second thing he hit on was to never really worry about your numbers. Yeah, I know, like, that sounds like kind of dumb, especially when you're a salesperson, but he said, like, working like that, you stress yourself out to a point to where, like, sometimes you become less efficient because you're so worried about money. You have to, like, think about the expenditure side in a way that really is an expenditure, and that's a hard focus for some people to do. But if you do enjoy your job, it just comes kind of like naturally, like what's the word for it? Organic would be the word for it. So instead of, like, just always pressing about, hey, I've got to make this X amount of sales, like this number at the end of the time, think about it as like a job you actually enjoy. And like I said, for some people that might be hard. For him, it was actually really easy because he did enjoy selling it, even though it was like, food service products. It's nothing sexy, but he did it, and that was his thing. The last thing he told me to do, the last thing that I learned, not told me to do, was that I have it written up. 1 second. Regardless of what you're selling in, believe it, because a lot of people do sell products that sometimes they don't like, and this, like, really, really drives, like, a factor when you're talking to someone. If you don't even believe in the product, they're not going to believe in the product, and so you really do have to sell it and sell yourself as both the person and the product. My conclusion for this would be, I actually thought sales was really, really interesting. It's a lot of travel, so it's a little, strenuous, and sometimes you do have to be, like, state to state. Austin did tell me one time he was going from, like, New York to Florida to, like, Kansas. Like, he was from, like, across the state and, like, across the country in, like, a 1 whole week. And so it is like, sometimes it does seem difficult, especially when you're working for such a large company. But I think if you like it, you have a good time. So
Traveling can be good job. Traveling can be a benefit for a lot of people. A lot of people enjoy the fact that they travel, and then there are others that don't want to travel, and so they want to look for a company where it's more regional. If you go into, for example, pharmaceutical sales and stuff like that, that's generally region based, and you're not necessarily traveling as far. Particularly if you're in a large metropolitan area.
I really like the travel aspect. I thought that was really good.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people do. That's what's attractive to a lot of students, is that they get to see all kinds of different areas of the country. And for others, it's not. Gartner has a 2-year internal sales, and one of the things that has happened with a lot of our students who've gone through their internship program is that because they do want to travel, particularly while they're younger and don't have kids, that's not necessarily an attractive option for them, because they are stuck inside for 2 years. So, but just something to think about. All right, keep going.
Now, my name is John. I interviewed Mr. Park. He has been in the insurance company, which is the 6th largest company in South Korea, about 16 years. He emphasized on the relationship between salespeople and customer. It is very important to be honest with the customer about customers' profit and loss. And also he said that it's important to keep familiar with recent information because in this case there are many cases in which the contents of insurance are changing according to the law. And last, I learned that salespeople with personal networks and extroverted elements have more strengths. And thank you.
Okay. And he's from your country, is that where you got the contact?
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Mr. Morris.
My name is Graham Morris. I interviewed Ford Price, Price Edwards. It's the largest third-party commercial real estate company in Oklahoma. Third-party real estate includes commercial property management, leasing and sales, and tenant construction. I was actually referred to him by an architect in my church that builds for him, so that's kind of why I chose him. 3 things I learned. Real estate takes a lot of self-motivation. You have to have the aspirations of being your own boss and control your own professional destiny. I think that's synonymous in sales, no matter where you are. Reputation has the ability to make or break you in real estate. Therefore, being honest and taking integrity seriously is crucial when it comes to being successful for a long period of time. And then the third thing, Mr. Price said that although he believes going to college was very important for his success, 90% of what he's learned is on the job. And so, in conclusion, the 2 most important things to be successful in real estate is your reputation and your ability to analyze and predict the future market.
All right. So he doesn't think that college is as important as the on-job training.
Yeah. Well, he said college was very important for time management, organization, things like that. But when it comes to for the job, he didn't think it was as important.
But he doesn't have a sales degree.
He does not.
He does not have a sales degree. Most people don't have a sales degree. So that's, I think, one of the things that has happened is that we have shifted. And I have to admit that I started out as a liberal arts person, and so I was much more interested in things like history and philosophy. And we've become much more vocational in our degree programs. Other countries don't have, by the way, the degree programs that we have in this country. They sort of look at them and laugh. I have friends who teach, for example, at Oxford, and they go through our course catalog, and they think it's kind of funny because we have things like here at UCO, we offer a degree called Recreation and Leisure Management. I actually took that class when I was an undergraduate because I thought I was my last semester and I wanted easy classes. I waited and I put off taking my PE credits so I could take weight training my last semester and just sort of skate on through. I took wellness and positive lifestyles that last semester where they teach you things like you should brush your teeth, right? I think I figured that out long before, but it was an easy class. And then I thought, well, I'll take this class in recreation and leisure because I know how to recreate. I'm good at this. I'm good at leisure lifestyles. And it was actually the hardest class I took that semester because there was a lot of work involved and they wanted us to go out and visit all of these recreational sites. So what do people with that degree get? Well, you go to work for like nursing homes and you design recreational programs for people like that. Or you go to work for the Edmond Parks and Rec Department and you design activities and programs based on the community needs. And so it was actually kind of an interesting deal. But my friends at Oxford sort of look at this and say, that's not what a college education is about. It's not about teaching you a vocation. But we have in the United States become much more vocational. And so I think there has been a shift away. Traditionally, people went to college and that probably helped you in terms of being able to sort of be a well-rounded individual, but you didn't necessarily have a substantive skill set. Now it's more about developing a substantive skill set like in professional sales than it was in the past. And so you'll find a lot of the salespeople out there may have gone to college, particularly if they're in business-to-business sales, because most business people are not going to listen to somebody else who doesn't have, who's not somewhat polished and educated. So they may have a degree in business, but they didn't get an actual degree in sales, and so they think that it's just something that you have to learn on the fly. And they don't realize that we actually do a pretty good job of teaching
Yeah, I think his degree was in finance and he was planning on going to law school after that. And he just
Didn't go to law
around
school.
it. Yeah, he ended up enjoying sales.
Yeah, well, that's good. You know, we've got enough lawyers, we're just chock full of lawyers here, so, you know, I'm an example of that. Is there anybody else that I missed that needs to go? All right. I'm gonna have to go back there and see if I can see, just the screen got.
Yeah, I did it with my chair. I'm actually.
That's
the
all right.
person I interviewed was Mr. Akshay Reddy. He was a store owner. Actually, but it's a family business, but he's also the manager of the store. He's the owner of Select Mobiles. It's a franchise. It's one of the famous franchises in India. He told me some interesting things about building rapport and uh, like the consequence of losing a sale and all. When I asked him about how to build a rapport, he told it's not from exactly from the salesperson's end. Even the consumer needs to feel that you're one of their community to break the ice, and they need to communicate with you. For that, you'll have to treat them as friends and family, and you have to make sure that the other person thinks the same about you. That will make easy to communicate. And losing the sale, when I asked him about how it would be like, I mean, what are the cases that you lose a sale? He told when you lose a sale, not only have smile on your face, you'll have to see the smile on the customer face, because not all the time you'll have what the customer wants with you. Sometimes you will not have what they want, but you'll have to make sure that the experience that they have with you, the relationship that you maintain with them, it should be the same like when the sale was before started.
Alright.
And yeah, I felt sales is really something that not easy.
Not easy. So are you gonna be a salesman?
Not exactly.
No. Okay, what's your career called then?
I'm actually into digital marketing. I run my own Facebook pages on social media. That's how I met this guy. I run a Facebook page for my hometown,
Okay.
which is actually for local business over there. He once contacted me to promote his store on the page, but I couldn't do that because my page wasn't ready for the local promotions yet. That's why I got a contact of him, and yeah, I called him.
Alright, very good. So you're gonna have to sell your own stuff though.
Yeah, I mean, kind of marketing, not like face-to-face sales.
Right. Well, a lot of sales is not, I mean, there's been a rise and uptick in telemarketing again because the do not call lists don't seem to work, so we can always rely on that. All right, very good. Any other comments? All right, if you did it extemporaneously, Chris, you did, anyone else did it extemporaneously, you have to do. See me and I'll give you your points after. Be sure and see me because I don't remember, I forget these things, so I have a horrible memory for such details. So you gotta come talk to me. I know it's I'm a scary person according to my sales team. They hate practicing with me for some reason. I don't know why. So we need to talk about the presentation today. So this is a big part of what we're building towards is the presentation, which obviously is important to you because that's what you're going to do. You're going to do a sales presentation for a big part of your grade in this class. That's a significant component, is actually making a sales presentation on something that you find that you enjoy. Now, if you go into the advanced class and other classes, we will tell you what you're going to sell. So that's an advantage to this first class, is you can sell something that you really enjoy and that you're comfortable with. When we get into the advanced class, we always sell whatever is going to be sold at NCSC or ICSC that year, so our students get a lot of practice in selling that particular product. So, and then we also sell for our own competition, Paycom. So you'll be told what you're going to sell in those. You get to choose what you're going to present in here. So, developing a persuasive presentation. Prospects demand a product that does what they want. This seems obvious, but it wasn't always so, because we really developed during the Industrial Revolution this idea that we could just mass produce goods and people would buy them because they were better than the alternative. And so you sort of had things like small, medium, and large in terms of men's shirts or pants. You had small, medium, and large. And now what do you get? Think about the options that you have. What can you order online? What can you get in terms of men's shirts now? How many of you have heard the advertisements for Proper Cloth? None of you have heard the advertisements on television for Proper Cloth. You've been zipping and zapping past the advertisements, so you haven't listened to them. What is Proper Cloth? Anybody who's heard the advertisements, what do they do? Yeah, they basically ask you some questions, and they send you custom-made shirts based on your measurement. Now, in the past, if you wanted custom-made shirts, what did you have to do? Where'd you have to go? You had to go to a tailor and have them made, or someplace like Tom James, very high end. Well, now, because we have the ability to mass customize things so quickly, we can actually do this in terms of getting online and just going through answering the questions about yourself, and they can custom make shirts. And this may be important because if you think about it, if you just have shirts, and most shirts to this day, like t-shirts and things like that, still come in just sort of small, medium, large, extra large sizes, what happens? What kinds of different body styles can you get? So historically, dress shirts, the thing that they measured was the neck and the length of the arms. But there are different body types, right? Some people have, for example, I have a longer lower body than an upper body. My torso is shorter than other people. Some people have short little legs and long upper bodies, and they're different bodies. So you can get these sort of customizations. And so people now want stuff. And if you think about it, how many of you have seen the advertisements for Untuck It? None of you have seen the ads. God, do you people, you're marketers, do you watch ads?
I really don't pay for cable.
I'd say
Oh, okay.
online ads, so I don't think like the cable ads are receiving much more.
I was like,
Like Hulu.
Okay. So you all are totally going, you're getting rid of the cord. Well, if you want to untuck your shirt, again, why is the length of your torso maybe going to matter? What's one of the reasons that men don't untuck their shirt? It's usually too long. Yeah, it comes down way too far. And so this company that was founded by, I think, Chris Riccobono is developing shirts that can be worn so that they come sort of right to your waist, and that you can wear them even with a jacket, with a sports coat, and still leave them untucked and not have them tucked in. So we want products that we can really highly customized, and that's definitely true in the business-to-business realm, that you're going to have a lot of technical specifications, and so prospects are going to want things that do what it is that they need to do. It's not going to be a one-size-fits-all anymore in terms of just sort of developing these software packages and things like that. If you think about various businesses, it's going to be more than just a standard suite of software that you're going to need. You're not just going to need, Microsoft Office and Excel and stuff like that. Depending on how sophisticated your accounting needs to be, that can develop, into highly specified and highly segmented product markets. For example, one of the companies that started in Oklahoma City that I can think of in terms of software is a company called Alamo, which does customer relationship and accounting software specifically for real estate professionals. And so it's a highly specialized company. You're going to have to explain it in language that they understand. Now, again, this is going to be dependent upon the industry that you go into. If you go into, you said, Ms. Adams, you wanted to go into medical device, right? Obviously, if you go into medical devices, you're going to be talking with, I have a sister-in-law who does medical devices, and she's talking to doctors. And so they understand highly technical language, and they're going to expect you to speak in highly technical language. But if you're selling copiers to a business, they're not going to care about, how the finisher collates the product in highly technical terms. They're not going to want you to get out the service manual and start flipping through it and show them how the paper goes from one tray into another, and then is stacked and stapled or whatever it does, they're gonna care about the end product. And so they're not gonna want technical language. So it's really context dependent on the industry that you're in. The text tells you, and for the most part, I agree with this, strive for passion, not perfection. People are more interested in relationships about your being passionate. They often buy because they have established a rapport with you, and they remember you and your presentation, your enthusiasm, more than maybe they remember the specifics of what you're telling them. If you're calling on your regular customers, you want to vary your presentation. You don't want to just go through the same thing over and over again. Right? You want to vary the presentation, ask about what's changed in their business, what kinds of new needs they may be experiencing. And it begins with planning. So learn to dutifully segment and target your audience based on the industry that you want to go into. So the objectives of the call depend on what type of call it is. If it's an initial call and you're doing business to business, you're probably not, unless it's a very simplistic product, you're probably not going to sell on that first call. It may take more than one call. And so the initial call is probably, in many instances, to develop and establish a rapport and define what the needs are of the customer. And when we do this in competition, for example, when we sell Paycom, we usually do like 3 rounds of competition. And so you don't get, the initial call will not be about selling, it will be about finding out whether or not the business actually can use Paycom. If it's a company that has, just one employee, what could that be? Well, if I got tired of standing up here and looking out at you as you all are playing on your phones and going to sleep and decided that I wanted to go back to the high-powered world of practicing law, I could hang out a shingle, and I still do, by the way. I still practice law for some people on the side. I could hang out a shingle and I could, sort of establish a law practice. And if I just had me, as the only employee and I didn't have a secretary or anything like that, do I need a payroll software system? Probably not. What do I need? Instead of a payroll software system, what do I probably need? How can you do, run a law office with, and there are lots of lawyers that are in it by themselves. I've got lots of friends who are in sole practices. They don't have a secretary. They go hang out at the courthouse. There used to be a guy when I first started practicing law years and years and years ago. His office was literally, we actually had shoe shine stands in the courthouse in that time. And he would sit there and get his shoes shined every day. And he gave, his card had the number of the payphone. You all don't even know what a payphone is. That was right next to the shoe shine stand. And he'd sit there and he'd go to the dockets every day and sit there and pick up drunks. He'd show up at the DUI docket. And his clients would contact him by showing up at the shoe shine stand or calling on the payphone. It was incredible. Like, talk about cheap beyond belief. And he was actually a fairly successful, he was just a volume business, but he kept those costs low and he could process DUIs, just really, really quickly. But he didn't need a payroll system. He's only got who? Himself. What does he maybe need? What might be helpful?
Maybe like a better phone service than what he had.
Maybe a better phone service. How about like income tax, right? That might be an issue, keeping track of that money and accounting. But he doesn't need a payroll system. He's not going to be a good prospect for Paycom, who focuses on people who actually have employees. If it's just you, I own a snow cone stand. I think I told you all this before. How I own the snow cone stand is just a long story, but I own the snow cone stand. And every people that I lease it to, basically I have new lessees every year for some reason. And it's just them. They don't need payroll software for the snow cone stand. It's usually just, maybe it's usually been a husband and wife team who have kids, or they get it for their kids because they think this will teach them how to run a business, and their kids instantly run off and decide that they don't want to run the snow cone stand because after you've made 1 or 2 snow cones, it's kind of boring. It's kind of fun to do it the first time, but after that, it's kind of boring. And so they don't seem to last very long. But they don't need a payroll system. So establishing rapport needs on that initial call. If it's a survey call, you're going to want to interview all the key decision makers. If you're selling learning management systems to UCO, and we've narrowed it down to Blackboard and Desire to Learn and WebCT or whatever else is out there currently, you're going to want to know who it is that you're going to have to talk to. You're going to have to talk to the chief information technology person and the head of the technology committee for the faculty, things like that. If it's the proposal, that's where you're going to present your buying recommendation to them. And in business-to-business sales, in selling to school systems, this takes a long time. It's not going to be one call. When we used to go out and sell learning management systems to K-12, the American Education Corporation, it took a long time. We'd get a request for proposal. We would answer the request for proposal. We would go out and meet with the superintendent. And then usually you have to make a presentation to the school board at some point. But it's not going to be done on that first call, because what has to happen if you're going to make a presentation to the school board? Do you just go in and present to school boards? No. You have to be on the agenda, right, to make a presentation. They have open meeting requirements in almost every state, and so you have to figure out how to get into that and get on the agenda and get your presentation through. And then the closing is to get commitment. And then follow-up, we'll talk about service after the sales. Service after the sale is important in most of what you all are going to be going into in the business-to-business context, because a lot of products now require, if you think about going back to the copier example that I have, we have constant, Carrie sends out a email once a week that the stapler is broken or something's gone wrong with the copier. And we have to have a service contract with that. And so it's going to be critical that you engage in good service after the sale and following up. And if you're developing relationships, if you're going into, again, pharmaceutical sales or medical device or things like that, Henry Schein, you're going to be calling on these people, month after month, week after week. And so follow-up calls and service are going to be important. We'll talk a lot about service. So presentation styles. The memorized presentation. Some companies provide you with a written presentation and they require people to memorize it. This was particularly true, probably more so back 15 or 20 years ago, when there wasn't a lot of preparation for professional sales. And so companies would do their own. And one of the things that they would start out with is just having you go through a rote script. What's good about the rote script? Well, you can quickly memorize it. Doesn't take too long to memorize a script, particularly if you're selling a fairly basic product. It's reliable. I teach integrated marketing communication. One of the things that you want to do when you communicate in all of those touch points with a customer is you want to be consistent in your message. And having a rote script ensures that they are consistent, that they are sending out the message that you want the customer to get. It's important to do that in many respects. So it's reliable. It can also help you build confidence when you first begin selling, to have a script. The big disadvantage is that it sounds what? What does it mean by it sounds mechanical?
You can tell it's rehearsed.
You can tell it's rehearsed. And the other thing that can happen in that mechanization process is that you don't listen because you're so focused on getting to the next line that you don't listen to what the customer is saying. It's just about getting to that next presentation. I saw this actually in a presentation this last 2 weeks ago at Great North Woods. So we give you this rubric for selling, and we tell you have to hit every point on the rubric, and that builds confidence. You start out with, hi, I'm Granny Geary, I'm from Hormel. That's what they were selling at Great North Woods. And I'd like to find out about your restaurant. So Hormel is packaged processed meat products by and large. That's their biggest thing is Little Smokies. How many of you have had Little Smokies or Sizzlers, those are all Hormel products. And so they're selling this and they're supposed to be going into a restaurant to meet with the chef. Well, the final round of competition was a scenario in which the salesperson had just been contacted by one of his key distributors who had talked to an owner of an all-natural food restaurant, an all-natural food store and restaurant. And the guy was upset because his chef, he found out, was using meat that was not all natural and not locally grown. So Hormel has a line of food, that was what they were selling this time, called Applegate. Applegate products are 100% organic and they are locally sourced. And that's their big selling point. So the owner of this restaurant and store had found out that his chef was actually using horse head, which is not organic and not locally sourced. And so he had told the chef he needed to change out meats. And they had provided the students with evidence that boar's head was not local and not organic, and you're supposed to go in and meet with the chef. And you already know this, and you had this in the script. And the students in this competition, the final three, these are supposed to be the best, you've been told that the chef has very little time to meet with you, that he is very temperamental, he doesn't like being told what to do. And so they walk into this presentation, and the chef they broadcast this, by the way, on big screens in an auditorium for everybody to watch. The chef is like throwing stuff around and saying, I don't know why this owner is demanding this. And all three of these people said, well, let's talk about your restaurant. You know about it already. You know, if that's what you're getting, get to the point. Don't be so committed to, you can get through every point in that rubric, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be in that linear fashion, right? And you've been told stuff already. You said, I don't know why you're here. So-and-so told me I have to meet with you. Well, get to the point. You know, don't be so committed to that script. Now, it's good, you know, again, it's helpful to memorize things, but you have to be somewhat flexible. The outline presentation is a little bit better in many respects because you don't have the exact words planned out in full detail, but it gives you a roadmap for where you're going to go. Then you have the extemporaneous presentation. If you're going to do this, you should have extensive knowledge, and in things like medical device and pharmaceutical sales, they are going to train you extensively on this. So you can do these sort of extemporaneous presentations. You're going to have extensive product knowledge. You're going to have intense prospecting, so you're going to have to know what the prospect wants ahead of time, have a really good idea. You have to thoroughly pre-approach your prospect and qualify your prospect. And you have to have a lot of selling experience usually on which to draw in order to do the completely extemporaneous presentation. Now, the advantage of that is that it's what? If you're really good at this, I used to not teach with PowerPoints. I hate PowerPoint. I absolutely hate it. But students kept writing in my student evaluation. So I do read these, by the way. They kept writing he doesn't use PowerPoint. And the reason I don't use PowerPoint is because I watch my colleagues who use PowerPoint. First of all, they put too much on the PowerPoint. And then the second thing they do is they sit there and they read you the PowerPoint. We can all read. And it's boring. I hate PowerPoint. The other reason I hate them is because you all do this thing where you say, can I have your PowerPoints? And I used to say, no, you can't have my PowerPoints because you need to learn to take notes and you need to write down what I say. Well, what should I write down? Everything I say is questions, right? Everything. Now you can't write down. Taking notes is really important because you have to sort of shorthand. But I hate PowerPoint because people read the PowerPoint. Now, the good thing about when I finally caved, because I got enough student evaluations that said, why don't you use PowerPoint? Is that I go off on far fewer tangents than I used to. At this point in my life, I've had a lot of experience in business. And I've had a lot of experience trying cases to juries and doing interesting things. And so I can tell lots of stories. And I will go off on these stories, and students sometimes like the tangents, and sometimes they're like, you're constantly off on a tangent, and I can't follow you. And the good thing about the PowerPoint, the outline, is that it does force me to sort of stick to it. But one of the advantages of doing it completely extemporaneously is that I used to be able to focus more on watching your reactions to what I'm saying and tailor the presentation more to what I think is going to actually get your interest back. Whereas now I sort of stick to the PowerPoint. And so in an extemporaneous, if you're really good at it, and you're good at sales and you know your product really well, you can figure out where your customer is going and whether or not they're being receptive. It gives you a lot more flexibility to read their body language and figure out whether or not they're actually listening to you, or whether you're just sort of going through the motions with them by using your outline or going through your memorized presentation. Product analysis worksheets. Know not only your product, but how your clients will benefit from it. Develop many presentations, units of conviction that are building blocks that you can use to construct the information you present and get buy-in by the client. All products and services have features. But clients are not really interested in the features. Again, my fascination with copiers. Just absolutely fascinated by the copier. Years ago, before they could hook it up to the network and we could just send the test over, one of the big advances in copiers was this ability of the copier to feed documents in and then collate those documents and staple them. That's a huge thing. So that's a feature. What is a feature? Being able to staple and collate a document is a feature. But do we care about that as a professor? Do I care about that for its own sake? When I first started teaching, a lot of the copiers on campus didn't have that ability. They didn't have the ability to duplex. So all of our tests were, here's a copy of the most recent test that I handed. By the way, you also need to come up and see me if you didn't get your test back, because I handed it back. I need you to look at those and make sure that the score is correct, obviously, because some of you got bonus points. So they didn't have the ability to duplex. If you were interested, if you were an environmentally friendly, tree-hugging bunny thumper from California who didn't want to deforest the planet, which, by the way, that's not how we get paper. We're not deforesting the rainforest to make this paper. They deliberately grow trees for this paper. And this is one of my tangents, because it's an issue with me, something I'm passionate about. Recycling paper is horrible for the environment. It's a net negative energy loss because it requires more to bleach the paper than it does to make new paper. But if you're one of these people that in the past was an environmentalist, which I'm not, I don't have kids, so global warming is good for me. Yeah, I don't like the cold. Not worried about future generations. But if you were one of these tree-hugging bunny thumpers that wanted to collate or wanted to duplex in the past, what did you have to do? Well, you would have had to have put the paper in upside down in the tray and then fed it back through. Now copiers will duplex this. What's the benefit? Like, nobody cares about the fact that it'll duplex. That's a feature. Duplexing is a feature. What's the benefit that people care about that we're duplexing? It's what? Yeah, it's reduction of paper. It's using less stuff. Now, in the greater scheme of things, is that saving us a lot of money? Copy paper's cheap. Probably not saving us a whole lot of money. But we can all feel better about the environment. you know, and are using less stuff. And it's something that makes us feel better about the world we live in. God help us. Right? So that's a feature. What's the benefit? Well, we're using less stuff. From my perspective, what's a more important feature? That it will collate and staple this. Why is that? Because when I first started teaching, you'd have to do this what? Even if they would collate, a lot of the copiers wouldn't staple. So that meant that you had to do what? You had to hand staple them. What does that do? That takes a lot of time. If you're a lowly college professor to staple, you know, I used to have classes, well, I still do sometimes. I had classes that would have 150 in Troy Smith Auditorium. And if I have to staple 100, that's a lot of time that takes for people to do that. So I don't care about the feature in and of itself for itself. What do I care about? I care about the benefits that I'm going to get as a result of that feature. I care about the benefits, not necessarily the feature itself. One feature does not necessarily equal one benefit. That's important. And as you're listening to your customer and you're talking to them and you're building a relationship, recognize that it's not one for one. What's the benefit of having a copier that will staple this? Well, it means that I don't have to staple it. But beyond that, what does it mean? It means that it saves me time and effort. It also means that what? That there's consistency. I mean, that's another benefit of that feature, is that it saves time, and it does what to the staple? You put it on the thing, whereas when I had to staple them myself, when I first started teaching, and you had to staple copies yourself, you know, the staples sort of ended up all over the place. Is that a huge benefit to me? I don't really care if you have to sort of work around the staple, but you know, it's a benefit to you that it's not stapled on top of the name or something like that, like it used to be when I'd have to do it quickly myself. So one feature can have a lot of benefits. The ability to staple means that I don't have to do it. It's saving me time. It's quality control. It's consistent. It's a benefit to you. So it's not necessarily a one-for-one. Effective presentation tactics. Participation is critical. If you can get people involved, if they can touch, taste, feel the product, service, it's important. When I showed you the videos of them selling ADP, what were they doing? Here's the app. You do it. You can see how easy it is. A good demonstration will catch the buyer's interest, strengthen your selling points, allow the prospect to understand the value, stimulates your own thinking and your own interest. It cuts down on objections. This is a huge one. A good demonstration will cut down on objections. If they can actually see it, how is this going to save me time? You know, I mean, getting them to actually run payroll in a simulation for ADP cuts down on the, I don't think I can do this. I'm not a technical person. My employees are not technical people. We don't understand how to do that. Well, if they can actually touch it, see it, that cuts down on one objection that they might have, which is, how in the world, I've been having my wife figure out hourly payroll for the restaurant for the last 20 years. She knows how to do that. She's not good at an iPhone. Well, here you go. If they actually touch it and see it, then you can cut down an objection and actually help close the sale. So keep the prospect's attention on you. The 3 exposure hypothesis, you got to tell them 3 times for them to remember stuff. Get them into it, have them touch, feel, see the product, demo it, and keep them glued to you or the screen. That's the best way to, particularly in business to business, you're going to be showing them stuff probably online or in on a tablet or something like that. Keep them glued to the screen, keep them interested in it, in the act. Sales tools, audio, visual. Having audio visual is good. One of the things that you can do, and we do in competition a lot, is we'll have these flip chart organizers so that you can easily get to the product information. One of the best presentations I saw this last time, they're selling Hormel, and this kid had organized his flip chart so that he could get right to it with very clearly labeled tabs, so that when the prospect, which there were 3 rounds, in the first round you were selling to, you're trying to get into a distributor. In the second round, you were trying to get the product used by a restaurant. And in the third, it was a restaurant again, a direct to consumer type thing. But the one that was selling business to business to the distributor, he was really effective in knowing where that information was and having it organized in a very nice presentation format so that he could get to it very quickly and answer questions about the price per pound and how much shrink and things like that you had. Today with high tech, the sky's the limit in terms of what you can do with regard to a good audio visual. Just be sure that the quality is good, because people will judge you. I had a student last semester actually say on one of their written projects in sales, I handed it back, and it was just grammatically horrible, and had the audacity to ask me what grammar and spelling have to do with sales. And after I picked myself up off the floor and suggested that perhaps they should fail, because I generally don't think that there's any such thing as a stupid question, but that one comes really close to a stupid. What does grammar and spelling have to do with professional sales? Well, you're going to be judged by people who are in business, and the ability to communicate effectively is going to be enormously important. And so making sure that even though you have high tech, I mean, it's easy to get whiz bang stuff, but making sure that the quality is still good, that the presentation quality is enormously important. Another stupid question: when did wild poodles roam the earth? Just as an aside. That's a tangent. Situational selling, you should have a plan, but be flexible. This is one of the things that a memorized script doesn't necessarily allow you to do. So have a plan, but remember that you can't always predict with high degrees of certainty. Now, if you do a lot of good research in your prospecting and pre-planning, you will be less surprised than you might think. If you have an idea of what the social style is of the prospect based on things that you've done by looking at social media, getting on their LinkedIn, you will be less surprised, and you may not need as much flexibility, but things can always go awry. You can arrive on a day when somebody's having a bad day, when they're not prepared. So you have to be flexible. The setting is important, particularly in business to business sales. There are sort of standards in various industries. For the most part, with regard to pharmaceutical sales and medical device sales, you're going to go to them. Why is that? Now, there's a disadvantage. And so they used to do this. One of the things that I used to make a lot of money doing was, before they had 1099 doctors, if they gave them anything, they changed the IRS rules. They used to be able to take doctors out, and they would come to, for example, the Stone Line Inn, and they would have me write, or my mother write in a drug into the murder mystery. And so they would bring doctors out and they would do the murder mystery, and we would write the drug into the murder mystery as part of the plot, and they would do training on it. Now, if they give them something that's more than de minimis or a lunch or something like that, they actually have to send the doctor a 1099, which means it's income to them, and they don't want to do it. And so they don't do that a whole lot anymore. In the good old days, before they tightened up on those regulations, pharmaceutical companies would have suites at Remington Park when Remington Park first opened, and they would take doctors up there and get them good and liquored up and let them bet on the ponies and try to get them to, you have a tendency to like people who do things like that for you, but you can't do that so much anymore because of these income requirements or income rules. So now traditionally, they go to doctor's offices. Henry Stein, you're going to go to the doctor's office. You're going to meet them. Now, what's the disadvantage of doing that? Well, you're on their turf. They can be distracted. You can get them to come to you. It's going to be better. Now, in that industry, it's just hard to do. You're not going to, you're not going to get doctors to do that. You still can go to conferences, but one of the things is if you can get them on neutral turf, the power lunch, there is an old adage that there are more deals closed on the golf course than in the boardroom. And I think that that's still something to think about. There is a lot to be said for getting out and having something like that. I don't know that it necessarily has to be the actual golf course, because playing 18 holes can take a long time anymore. But, go to Top Golf. How many of you like Top? I love Top Golf. I absolutely love it, because you can go and you can play for an hour. You don't have to commit an entire afternoon. So, and you get food and beer. So think about that. Interruptions, ask them if it's possible to make sure that the calls are held. Be respectful in that, but try to cut down as many interruptions or distractions as you possibly can. Any questions? All right. Well, if you, I'll stop the recording. If you got bonus points for presenting extemporaneously, but you need those, come see me. If you have something else you want to talk about, you can come see me as well.